The 1975 story of a sentimental celebration of an event of 50 years ago, when a 1923 model Citroen was the first car to complete the Australian continent. A similar model, completely restored, was to be driven 8,500 miles by a Queensland champion rally driver, Jim Reddiex, and his crew of 5. Obviously, success relied firstly upon meticulous vehicle preparation. The car, completely reduced to component parts, each checked, replaced or reconditioned as required. Stripped to her underwear, an early beauty she was surely not. Long days and nights of devotion to duty, sometimes turning just a little laborious by working with unfamiliar gearing and transmissions of an age gone by. However, and joyous determination eventually saw the emerging of the demure French butterfly from her workshop cocoon. The sense of accomplishment was obvious as the newly born took its first steps in nearby streets. That, of course, was not enough, and more thorough testing had to follow. Passing through these with the greatest of ease, the stage for the adventure was set. It remained for the traditional naming ceremonies and festivities amongst those who had watched the project with interest in previous months. Still living 1925 trip veteran Greg Davies from Perth joined the festivities to unveil the now resplendent Bubsy 2. Just a touch of French champagne for a French lady, with some left over for her admiring fans. From festivities to the big moment, departure day from Brisbane City Square, where spectators mingled with enthusiastic television and newspaper reporters. Greg Davies, of course, would not let himself be kept away from the action and enjoyed immensely recounting memories of long ago. Greetings from the Lord Mayor of Brisbane were taken in charge by Jim to be handed to the Mayor of Perth, the next major capital on the journey, but as yet oh so far away. The previous owners of Bubsy were amongst the excited onlookers, so proud that their old friend had found new life. And so it was goodbye to all and into the starter's hands, to be flagged on by visiting film star Patrick Cargill. A star farewells a star. Showing a clean pair of heels, Bubsy outstrips her supporting cars, leads them through the inner city, through the suburbs, and turns her head north. Following the Pacific Highway to a momentary stopover at the normally sunshine coast town of Nambour. Despite the inclement weather, spirits are high and people are eager to be part of the adventure. The greeting from the people was expressed by Shire Councillor Daniels, who presented a gift to our adventure leader with wishes for a happy journey. The stay was short, and it was wheels away again in the northerly direction through the towns of Rockhampton and Mackay to the second city of Queensland, Townsville. Where an opportunity was taken to remove the evidence of the previous wet conditions from the vehicles in a beautifully enjoyable sunshine. From Townsville, the direction was now west, and once out of town, the unknown condition of the roads prompted a precautionary vehicle inspection. It seemed, however, that the grease gun was to give more trouble than the cars. Leaving the blue of the Pacific coast and the greens of the mountain ranges behind, it was then towards the open plain country of central Queensland. with its unbroken terrain on either side of a narrow strip of quite enjoyable bitumen. Into the areas where 6 people make a crowd, and when you have a crowd, somebody is sure to get in the way. The crew now used to the delicate pandering required of vintage machinery appreciated the relatively easy going as much as they could, for it was obvious that such good fortune could not last. Subtly but surely, the road surfaces changed, initially with only a gradual intermingling of unsealed sections. However, the ease of comfortable cruising was interrupted abruptly when the support caravan decided to shed a wheel, causing major damage to axle and under-assembly. Some thoughtful moments after so little time away. Undaunted, some quick decisions. Part of the party to stay behind and effect repairs with flown-in parts. The others to move on with an arranged rendezvous further along the track. Moving on through western Queensland towns of Mount Isa and Camberwell and into the Northern Territory to arrive at a point where western traffic meets that travelling the continent north to south. It was here at a place appropriately called Three Ways that the depleted party rested. In such remote places one could not expect too much in the way of luxury, but restaurant cooked meals and petrol for refuelling also meant people and an opportunity to meet and talk with other unexpected travellers. Like the circus troupe, limbering up in the early morning to keep alive their keenness for the next stand probably hundreds of miles down the road. Or the travelling signwriter, whose workload must obviously have been diminished by his sensible dress and the freedom from pressures of city life. This three-directional traffic way was also the site of the memorial to Dr. John Flynn, pioneer of the Royal Flying Doctor Service, a justly respected medical service upon which Outback Australia highly depends. Out of this three-way stopover, the direction was changed to north. The roads, for a little while at least, expected to be good. At Attack Creek, the backup crew, wanting to stay just that little behind, studied the memorial to inland explorer John Stewart and took time to catch the news, even though by now some days old. Meanwhile, others forged ahead, seeing the overland telegraph poles slip by, the roads breaking now into predominantly gravel and dust, requiring drivers to continually manoeuvre the vehicles to select sections of road offering least discomfort to rear ends all around. The party would not have the luxury of comfortable beds or meals at a table for a few more days, so it was to choose the softest stone patch available beside the road, praying that it was not overwhelmed by rain or by those insects that had a nasty habit of finding only the tender spots of the body. The glory of that style of living came from being part of a magnificent sunrise in the clean, unpolluted streams which, because of their scarcity, were relished whenever possible. But good things lay ahead as the team leader pressed the point to a crew dragging out the moments of relaxation by taking off at a brisk walking pace into the distance. The crew did not need much coaxing, so it's mount up, engines alive, to proceed through a mixture of plain and mountain country, over dry creek crossings with caution, the road dodging through boulders, seemingly strewn with gay abandon. The not too sophisticated road system now requiring the maximum in concentration and early rotation of drivers. Exhausting work, and it was so easy now as when in the passenger seat to catch a few minutes rest, no matter how unimpressed you were with your mate's attempt to find smooth travelling. There was no one to welcome the travellers at the old mud brick post office in the early hours of the morning, for the township of Halls Creek that it once served was removed many years ago some miles down the road. However, our travellers, having stopped to marvel at the lasting qualities of the building materials, seized the opportunity for a quick breakfast, a refuel and service check. Refueling stations were by now quite scarce, so our backup total supplies were of great advantage. With little time for an adequate digestion of breakfast, the wheels spun again towards Halls Creek proper, hairpin bends and corrugations keeping drivers alert to the expense of fully enjoying what must be some of the most unique country on earth. Even in this remote part of northern Western Australia, the people of Halls Creek were aware of the impending visitors and were eager to be part of the occasion. Whilst some party members communicated with home, the reception of the local school children was such that the French lady was almost overwhelmed by their attention. So elated was she that, like a French poodle barking at a Great Dane, she set out to show off amongst the large cattle trains used over the great and rugged distances of northern Australia. From the Halls Creek oasis, it's back to the dust again, and being no match for the giant transporters, it was easy to decide who had right of way. Now heading west and rapidly approaching the west coast with our desire to see the coast again, not making us oblivious to the harsh beauty of the surrounding terrain, or the flat-topped mountains which were distinctly different from anything we had previously seen. But there it was at last, the Indian Ocean at Broome. But despite the enticement of this history-ridden area, it was only for a short while that the journey was to be interrupted. A quick clean-up of all units, the crew and their belongings, a purchase of some fresh stores now considerably depleted. Out of Broome by late afternoon, now heading south through the sunset, down the Western Australian coast, still abound with dust strips for roads, pushing on to the mining town of Port Hedland, the destination of another few hours' break. A product of recent and rapid iron ore development, where its salt stacks, rumbling road trucks and ore trains seemed so out of character with the whole adventure to date. A dusty memorial to man's creative ability, with a different class of interest for those seeing it for the first time. The giant scoops and conveyors feeding hungry-bellied ships bound for foreign ports almost non-stop. Signs of industry bringing reminders of larger cities. The capital, Perth, became the next goal, but not before meeting up with a recent acquaintance that we'd not so long before met on the other side of the continent. The Tropic of Capricorn, bearing no other memorial than this simple signpost. It was revered as a yardstick of achievement. Flushed with those pleasant thoughts, there seemed nothing now to stop the progress to the adventure's second most important target, Perth. From here, the turning point was to home. Without misadventure, and a little ahead of time, the crew relished in the comfort of the home of Greg Davies, the 1925 veteran who had returned to Perth to await the arrival. A warm cover into which rain and sun did not invade, and into which insects were not at all welcome. Centred in a fruit-treed garden with home cooking replacing the roadside scratchings of dubious quality, some of the crew tried their hand at the overdue laundry, which never did quite turn out as the soap manufacturers predict. Through the days, a succession of visitors came to marvel at the visitor from the East Coast. Fully rested and fed, the following day saw the official arrival of Perth. The party paraded through the city streets, being welcomed at council chambers by the Deputy Mayor and his party. Greetings from the Brisbane officials were exchanged for a letter to the Mayor of Adelaide. And as the caravan had become the blackboard for amateur signwriters all around the country, the Deputy Mayor of Perth also became an invited guest. With Perth being the first real stopover of more than a few hours, full opportunity was taken to relax and see this marvellous city. With some aerial shots from a light plane arranged by the local Citroen car club, a sure way to see the beauty of this Perth in limited time. It was here also that it was discovered that their very original 1923 car was in the process of restoration, and the temptation to compare notes was just too difficult to refuse. It was unanimous, beautifully done, and a credit to the owner, the son of the other 1925 record holder now deceased. There would be little time after Perth, for a while, to see the ocean at close quarters, so when the fishermen were noticed reeling them in, the fish stories became abundant as a few minutes were spent watching the local technique. Souvenirs just had to be purchased for those at home, so the crew left quite some few dollars for Western Australian businessmen to enjoy, but in return took away the experience of some unique inner city shopping areas, such as the Open Air Mall and the London Court, with its old English atmosphere, and lancers on horseback who turn out to battle without bloodshed each hour. No matter where the place, old friends will turn up, as Jim discovered his 1974 World Cup rally winning car awaiting on the wharf for shipment overseas. As arrivals come and departures go, and so it eventually became the time to go. Rendezvousing at the Save the Children Fund headquarters, it was last-minute checks before cautiously finding the way out of unfamiliar suburbia, heading east to the wide open spaces again. But not before being given a reception by the entire Vintage Car Club Kellerberry, which despite their small numbers, exuded such enthusiasm that our stay could have extended well beyond the scheduled time. It was here that another vintage Citroen had its home, and when enthusiasts get together, all else seems unimportant. With a regal procession out of town, the crew made up some lost time. And soon we're putting many miles behind. Now eating into the low-lying scrubby perimeter of the Nullarbor Plain, an area that would receive the party's presence for the next day or so. An old, now disused telegraph station caught the crew's eyes just to the side of the Nullarbor Road, near Balladonia, and another chance to check on a piece of history was too opportune to neglect. A landlocked whale was the last thing one would expect to see, but when on closer examination it proved to be of concrete, it seemed that the sun had not been so powerful after all. The Lewin Bay whale was a historical reminder of an area that in past days provided riches from the hunt of this magnificent species. Continued application of the task well into each night saw the highways of Western Australia disappear into the realms of South Australia. From the joys of pleasant motoring over sealed miles to the agony and bone-shattering experience that was the lot of the motorist over the remainder of the Nullarbor. Surprises seemed to abound on the Nullarbor, with the meeting of two men from London running to Sydney to raise funds for the establishment of a sporting club. One could but marvel at their tenacity and enterprise, at the same time wondering, just wondering. But we could not delay. Appointments in Adelaide reminded us of a schedule to keep. The same schedule that swept us out of Adelaide almost as quickly. The greetings of so many supporters still fresh in memory. Through the pleasantly green and clean suburbs to find the highway that was to lead to Melbourne, capital of Victoria. The finding of Melbourne was made easy, as despite the chill of a wet day, the local Citroen car club turned out in their numbers to bid us welcome. Vintage cars seemed to be turning up quite regularly, and another immaculately restored veteran took the eye of our discerning crew. Official functions over, with very little exercise over the last weeks other than strengthening leg muscles on clutch and accelerator. The crew all supported a quick game of squash to iron out the wrinkles. After Jim had arrived in his personal conveyance, it was no holds barred, and the battering began. Not much talent there, but perhaps the long hours of sitting behind the wheel were to blame. Despite the discharge of energy, the team summoned sufficient reserves to push on to Canberra, where an 8-hour stopover was all that could be spared. Temporary headquarters were made at the Total Service Station, and an official welcome by a Member of Parliament was extended to Jim. In similar fashion to all other points on the trip, Citroen enthusiasts were overjoyed at seeing the vintage visitor and took every opportunity to be part of the occasion. Like this motorcade through Canberra streets, which became so large that a police motorcycle escort was required. After heading out of Canberra, it was towards Sydney that the party headed, to arrive for an official welcome by the Mayor at City Hall. The Lord Mayoral exchange of chain letter greetings continued, with one being received for the final journey to follow to Brisbane. One could not be in such a world-renowned city as Sydney without visiting the travel brochure places of interest, like the resplendent and sometimes controversial Opera House. And the familiarly termed coat hanger, the Harbour Bridge. But home was now close at hand, and the end of a magnificent adventure only 2 days away. So it was refuel and service for probably the last time. And move off away from Sydney on the superhighways carved out of the mountains to leave sheer walls overlooking you on either side. On conditions such as these, recollections of the bull dust and the rocks and the stones of central and northern Australia and the interminable corrugations of the Nullarbor joyously faded a little in memory. When it comes to something a little out of the ordinary, our travellers found that all became children in their anxiety to sight at close hand modern history in the making. The star's reputation was preceding her everywhere, and so it was no wonder that the children of Wyong were anxiously awaiting her arrival. Such attention was hard to leave, but depart it was, heading north through the day and well into the night, up the comparatively well-populated northern New South Wales coast, to share the last roadside breakfast, which despite its limited culinary talent, was being used as a last stage recount of the week's proceeding and to ponder on possible future adventures. moving off in the early hours of the morning to an arranged meeting at Kempsey Save the Children preschool, where youngsters not 1/10 the age of the leading lady could not quite believe what was before their eyes, but nevertheless they were going to make the most of such an occasion. From Kempsey it was now through the fertile grazing and agricultural lands of northern New South Wales, with the landscape dotted with man-made structures, monuments to a closer settled community. Closer too were the cars able to travel, for roads were good and quick communication was possible if any difficulty occurred. Through the timbered coastal mountain ranges, the overshadowing trees softening pleasantly the brilliance of the sunshine. And it was all too soon that the familiar outer Brisbane suburbs appeared. Our crew momentarily stopped to take on some welcomers who could not wait for the inner city ceremony. They made their way into the inner city, picking up the familiar direction signs which pointed the way to the conclusion of a piece of modern history. Across familiar carriageways, which although had been cursed on many occasions, now seemed to exude a sense of belonging. To retrace the steps of 35 days previously, back into the city square from the reverse direction, to the eager reception of families and friends, and to finally conclude the exchange of leathered Lord Mayoral greetings from around the continent. An immaculate Bubsy too, unmarked from her adventure, shone like the star she was, and one could almost sense the quiet confidence by now so much part of her character. But after such a magnificent effort, even the hardiest adventurers are entitled to a little time to themselves. Of course, only to plan the next great Australian adventure.